"I'll take the fat one," the prince commanded, pointing at the obese slave girl no one wanted. The marketplace fell silent. Laughter rippled through the crowd as the trembling girl was shoved into his carriage. To everyone else, she was a joke, too heavy, too plain, too worthless to matter. But inside the stone halls of the castle, something stirred. This wasn't just a cruel jest. Behind those words hid a secret that could shatter the court. Whispers of a lost bloodline, a letter sealed by a dying duchess, and a truth powerful, enough to turn a mocked servant into a queen. But the courtiers are waiting, daggers hidden in their smiles, ready to brand her a fraud, a witch, a thief of honor. One wrong move, and she loses not only her place, but her life. The question hangs like a noose. Was she chosen out of pity, out of cruelty, or because fate itself had marked her for something greater? Comment below and tell me where in the, world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more. The spring morning dawned cold and gray over the city marketplace, where the cobblestones glistened with early dew. Merchants' voices rang out across the square, their cries mixing with the clatter of cartwheels and the murmur of gathering crowds. Fine carriages pulled by gleaming horses delivered noblemen wearing plumed hats and velvet cloaks who strolled with casual interest between the wooden cages where foreign slaves huddled together. At the edges of the marketplace, common folk gathered, in small groups, sharing whispered gossip behind raised hands while pretending to examine vegetables or lengths of cloth. Their furtive glances often strayed to the raised wooden platform where the day's captives stood waiting to be sold. Anna stood apart from the other girls, her plain brown dress hanging loosely on her plump frame. Her hands trembled where they were bound before her, though she fought to keep her chin raised with whatever dignity she could muster. The memories of her capture were still fresh wounds in her mind, the angry shouts as debt collectors stormed her village, the rough hands that had dragged her away, the endless days of marching in heavy iron chains that had left her ankles raw and bleeding. Weeks of meager rations had done little to diminish her fuller figure, unlike the slender, fair-haired girls who drew appreciative murmurs and eager bids. From the gathering crowd, a group of young nobles pointed and snickered behind jeweled fans and embroidered handkerchiefs. "Look at the size of that one," a lordling in blue silk called out, loud enough for all to hear. "She'd feed a family for a month." Cruel laughter rippled through the crowd, bringing hot color to Anna's cheeks. Yet she kept her gaze fixed ahead, refusing to let them see her pain. The marketplace's normal bustle suddenly stilled, rippling outward from the main gates. Prince Leopold had arrived. His tall figure moved with quiet authority through the parting crowd, his dark clothing stark against the colorful marketplace. Unlike the other nobles, he wore no elaborate plumes or gilded buttons. Only a single, silver pin at his throat marked his rank. The crowd held its collective breath as the prince began his inspection of the captives. Everyone knew why he had come. The palace had announced his search for new household staff, and all expected him to select the most beautiful girls for his estate. He moved slowly down the line, his expression revealing nothing as he studied each trembling captive. When he reached Anna's position, she felt the weight of his gaze but kept her eyes lowered, as befitted her station. The silence stretched until she could hear her own heart pounding. "I'll take the fat one." The prince's words fell like stones into still water. For a moment, the marketplace was frozen in shock. Then laughter erupted, harsh, mocking sounds that echoed off the surrounding buildings. Anna's head jerked up, involuntarily, certain she had misheard. But rough hands were already pushing her forward. She stumbled on the platform steps, her bound hands unable to catch her balance. The prince had already turned away, speaking quietly to the slave master about payment, while the crowd continued to roar with amusement at his cruel joke. Before Anna could fully grasp what was happening, she found herself being hustled toward. An elegant black carriage. The door's polished wood gleamed in the weak morning light as she was guided inside, her skirts catching awkwardly on the step. The interior smelled of leather and beeswax. Anna perched uncertainly on the edge of the plush seat, trying to make herself as small as possible in the confined space. When Prince Leopold entered and sat across from her, she quickly lowered her gaze to her bound hands. The carriage lurched into motion, wheels clattering against the cobblestones as they left the marketplace behind. Inside, only the steady sway of movement and the flickering light of the carriage lamp broke the heavy silence. The prince did not speak or even look in her direction. Anna remained perfectly still, afraid that any movement might draw his attention. As the city gave way to darker country roads, Anna watched shadows dance across the carriage walls and wondered what fate awaited her at the prince's estate. The uncertainty of her future pressed down on her like a physical weight, but she held her tears at bay. She had survived the shame of capture and the cruelty of the marketplace. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same quiet dignity. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in gentle pinks and golds as the prince's carriage wound its way through budding apple orchards. Anna's weary eyes widened at her first glimpse of the castle, its gray stone towers rising majestically against the morning light, morning mist curling around its base like a delicate shawl. The carriage wheels crunched on the gravel courtyard, where two neat rows of servants stood waiting, their backs straight and faces carefully blank. As the vehicle came to a halt, Anna's heart thundered in her chest. The footman opened the carriage door and she stumbled out, her legs stiff from the long journey. Her thin cloak offered little protection against the crisp morning air, and she wrapped it tighter around her shoulders. "Welcome home, Your Highness." A tall, thin man with graying hair stepped forward and bowed deeply to Prince Leopold. The prince nodded curtly and strode past his assembled household without a word, his boots clicking against the stone steps. The tall man, clearly the house steward, turned his attention to Anna, his keen eyes taking in her disheveled appearance. "Come with me," he said, his tone neither kind nor cruel. Anna followed him through wide hallways, past tapestries and gleaming suits of armor, up a narrow staircase, and into a section of the castle that was plain but well kept. He opened a door to reveal a modest chamber with a real bed, not a pallet in the servants' quarters as she had expected. A small window looked out over the orchards, and a chest stood ready for clothes she did not possess. "These are your quarters," the steward announced, ignoring the whispers of nearby maids who peered around corners with undisguised curiosity. "There must be some mistake," Anna ventured quietly. "I should be with the other servants." "These are His Highness's instructions," the steward cut her off firmly. "You will be bathed and properly dressed. You are not to work in the kitchens or perform heavy labor. Those are also his explicit orders." Before Anna could protest further, two servant girls whisked her away to a bathing chamber where they scrubbed her thoroughly with lavender-scented soap. They dressed her in simple but clean gowns of sturdy cotton, far finer than anything she had worn before. Her confusion grew with each passing moment. What did the prince want with her? As she explored her new surroundings later that morning, a round-faced woman with kind eyes approached her in the corridor. "There you are, dear. I'm Marta, from the kitchens." Her warm smile eased some of Anna's tension. "Come along. You must be hungry after your journey." In the busy kitchen, Marta pressed a bowl of hot porridge into Anna's hands. As she ate, a young man with a pronounced limp entered, carrying a basket of eggs. "That's Jakob," Marta whispered. "Works in the stables. Don't mind his leg. He has the gentlest way with horses I've ever seen." Jakob gave Anna a cheerful wave and a genuine smile, the first she'd received since arriving. "Welcome to our happy home," he said with a hint of playful irony that made her lips twitch despite her anxiety. Later that afternoon, as Anna sat in the castle's small chapel seeking comfort in prayer, An elderly priest approached her. His wise eyes crinkled kindly at the corners as he introduced himself as Father Matthias. "The Lord brings all his children to where they are meant to be," he said softly, patting her hand, "even when his path seems mysterious to us." When evening fell, Anna found herself directed to the great hall for supper. Instead of eating in the kitchen with the other servants, she was seated at a small side table, not with the prince at his high table, but not with the servants either. The arrangement left her feeling stranded between two worlds. The hall buzzed with quiet conversation and the clink of cutlery. Though Anna could feel curious glances from all directions, she kept her eyes fixed on her plate. Only once did she dare look up at the high table. Prince Leopold's gaze met hers for the briefest moment before he turned away, his expression unreadable as he returned his attention to his meal. Anna's spoon trembled slightly as she ate her soup. She had never felt so conspicuous yet, so invisible at the same time. The food, though finer than any she had eaten in weeks, tasted like ashes in her mouth as questions tumbled through her mind. Why had the prince chosen her? Why these strange arrangements? What fate awaited her in this grand castle, where she seemed to belong nowhere at all? The morning sun streamed through tall library windows, casting golden squares upon the rich carpet where Anna stood, a leather-bound book trembling in her hands. Prince Leopold sat in his carved wooden chair, his expression unreadable as he watched her. "You may begin," he said quietly. Anna's throat felt dry as she opened to the marked page. The familiar words of Scripture brought comfort, though her voice quavered at first. "The Lord is my shepherd," she began. "I shall not want." As she read, her voice grew steadier, warming with the familiar cadence of the beloved psalm. The prince's stern features softened almost imperceptibly. When she finished the scripture, he nodded toward a slim volume of poetry on the side table. "That one next," he instructed. The morning passed this way, with Anna reading while the prince listened, occasionally requesting a different book. It felt strange to be here in this grand room with its walls of books reaching to the ceiling, instead of scrubbing floors or working in the kitchen as she'd expected. In the servants' hall later that morning, whispers followed Anna like autumn, leaves in a breeze. She caught fragments as she passed. "Looks just like her," and "those eyes," and "the old Duchess's maid." Marta found her at midday, pressing a warm roll into her hands. "Don't mind them," she said kindly. "They're just stirring up old memories is all." But the whispers grew louder when Lady Beatrice visited that afternoon. The noblewoman had swept through the great hall, her silk skirts rustling, when she caught sight of Anna helping to arrange flowers. Lady Beatrice stopped dead in her tracks, her face draining of color. "Good heavens," she exclaimed much too loudly. "Those eyes, they're the Duchess's maid's eyes exactly." She turned to her companion, not bothering to lower her voice. "You remember Marie, the one who died in that dreadful carriage accident with the Duchess? The resemblance is uncanny." Anna's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the vase she was holding. She hurried from the room, her cheeks burning with embarrassment and fear. The lady's words seemed to echo through the corridors, spawning fresh waves of whispered speculation. Later that afternoon, Anna found herself in the silver room with Marta, helping to polish the many candlesticks that lit the castle's rooms each evening. As they worked, voices drifted in from the corridor outside. "It's not natural, her being given that room and set to reading like a proper lady's companion," one voice hissed. "Well, you know what they say about the old Duchess's maid and the Duke," another replied meaningfully. "Hush now," came a sharp warning, and the voices moved away. Anna's hands stilled on the candlestick she was polishing. Her heart seemed to have lodged itself in her throat. Beside her, Marta worked with fierce concentration, polishing the same spot over and over. "Marta," Anna whispered, "what really happened to the Duchess's maid?" The older woman sighed heavily. "It was before my time here, love. But they say she died trying to save the Duchess when their carriage went over in a storm. Both were lost. That night, God rest their souls." Fear settled like a cold stone in Anna's chest. The whispers, the strange looks, her mysterious placement in the household. It all seemed to point to something dangerous, something that could hurt not only her, but perhaps the prince's reputation as well. That evening, Anna knelt beside her bed, her hands clasped tightly as she prayed. "Dear Lord," she whispered, "grant me strength to face whatever lies ahead. Show me the path I should take." The floorboards in the corridor creaked softly. Anna held her breath, but no one entered. Instead, a thin shadow appeared beneath her. Door. And with it came a soft scraping sound. When all was quiet again, Anna rose and went to look. There on the floor lay a fresh beeswax candle, its surface smooth and creamy white. Such candles were precious, usually reserved for the family's private chambers. Anna picked it up, cradling it in her palms like a treasure. Someone had given her this gift, this silent message of support and kindness in the midst of her fears. She placed the candle carefully on her bedside table, its presence a comfort in the gathering darkness. Whatever tomorrow might bring, she was not entirely alone. The apple blossoms drifted like snow in the morning breeze as Anna walked beside Prince Leopold through the orchard paths. Her heart fluttered with each step, unsure why he had summoned her to this private audience. The prince's tall figure moved with measured grace, his hands clasped behind his back. "Tell me of your childhood," he said softly, breaking their silence. His voice held none of the mockery she had come to expect from nobles. Anna's fingers twisted in her simple skirts. "We lived in a small village, Your Highness. My mother worked as a maid, but she always found time to teach me my letters." The memory brought warmth to her voice. "She said knowledge was a gift no one could take away." "She taught you well," the prince observed, pausing beneath a flowering branch. "Your reading shows remarkable skill." "She died when I was young," Anna continued, surprised by her own openness. "After that, I worked in the fields, tended gardens, helped with harvests, hard work but honest work." She glanced at him, expecting to see distaste, but his eyes held only attentive interest. "And how came you to the slave market?" His question was gentle, but Anna's chest tightened at the memory. "Our village suffered poor harvests. The tax collector—" She swallowed hard. "Some of us were taken for the debts." Leopold's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, letting her words settle in. The spring air. In the days that followed, their meetings became a quiet routine. Each dawn found Anna in the library, reading scripture by morning light, while the prince sat in contemplative silence. As evening approached, she would return to read poetry, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each passage. One evening, while reading verses about love and honor, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. It made her heart skip strangely, though she dared not dwell on such thoughts. The night of the spring fête transformed the great hall into a glittering dream. Hundreds of candles cast their warm glow over the assembled nobility, their jewels and silk gowns shimmering like stars brought to earth. Anna stood near the wall in the gown Marta had chosen, simple blue wool, well made but plain among the splendor. "At least they clothed the cow," one lady whispered behind her fan, earning tittering laughs from her companions. Anna lifted her chin, fighting back the sting of tears. Then Prince Leopold appeared before her, his hand extended. "Would you honor me with this dance?" The hall fell silent. Anna could feel every eye upon her as she placed her trembling hand in his. "Your Highness," she managed, curtsying deeply. The musicians struck up a gentle minuet. Years of village dances had taught Anna's feet well, though never to such refined music. To everyone's astonishment, perhaps even her own, she moved with natural grace, following the prince's lead as if they had danced together 100 times before. "You dance beautifully," he murmured, soft enough for only her to hear. "My mother taught me the steps," Anna replied, her cheeks flushing. "She said every girl should know how to dance, no matter her station." "Your mother was wise indeed." His hand was warm and steady at her waist, guiding her through the turns with careful respect. When the music ended, Anna felt as if she were waking from a dream. The prince bowed over her hand, and she curtsied deeply before hurrying from the hall, her heart soaring despite the shocked whispers that followed her retreat. In her chamber, Anna's fingers traced her palm where the prince had held it. Joy bubbled up inside her like a spring, making her want to laugh and cry at once. She had danced with the prince. He had chosen her, had treated her with such unexpected kindness. But as she stood by her door, ready to fetch her nightclothes, voices drifted up from the corridor below. "Did you see? The nerve of that fat slave touching his hand as if she were worthy." Disgraceful. What can the prince be thinking, displaying her so? Mark my words, she'll pay for such presumption. No slave rises above her station in this court. The mais gay. Words struck Anna like physical blows, each one chipping away at her moment of joy. She pressed her hands to her mouth, muffling a sob as the beautiful evening crumbled into fear. Dawn light streamed through the kitchen windows as Anna stood beside Marta at the broad wooden table, their hands working together to knead the morning's bread dough. The familiar motions brought comfort after the previous night's unexpected dance with the prince. Her arms moved rhythmically, pressing and folding the soft dough while memories of graceful steps and gentle hands warmed her heart. "You danced beautifully last night," Marta said, her weathered face creasing with a kind smile. "Like you were born to it." Anna blushed, ducking her head. "The prince was most gracious to include me." "That he was," Marta agreed, though something in her tone made Anna glance up. The older woman's expression had grown serious. "But graciousness can stir dangerous waters, child?" Before Anna could respond, quick footsteps approached the kitchen. 2 young maids burst in, their faces flushed with excitement and fear. They grabbed fruits from the basket, whispering loudly enough for Anna to hear. "They say she's cast a spell on him," one hissed. "How else could someone like her catch the prince's eye?" "Look how large she is," the other replied. "Probably feeds on dark magic to maintain such size. No natural woman could—" Their voices trailed off as they hurried away, leaving Anna's hands trembling in the dough. Marta clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "Pay them no mind, dear. Empty heads make the most noise." But the whispers grew throughout the morning. As Anna carried clean linens through the corridors, she caught fragments of conversations that stopped abruptly at her approach. Ladies behind painted fans stared and murmured. Servants crossed themselves when she passed. Near midday, Count Reinhardt's commanding voice echoed through the great hall. Anna paused in a shadowed alcove, clutching her basket of linens as the Count addressed a gathering of nobles. "I have here," he proclaimed, holding up a sheaf of papers, "documented proof that this creature who dared dance with our prince is nothing but a runaway serf." His lip curled in disgust. "Her family owes generations of service to the eastern estates. She has no place in this castle, much less in the prince's company." Murmurs of shock and satisfaction rippled through the crowd. Anna's heart pounded. The documents were false. She knew her own history. But who would believe a slave over a count's testimony? Father Matthias found her later in the chapel, where she had fled to seek solace in prayer. The elderly priest's kind eyes held worry as he sat beside her on the wooden pew. "My child," he said softly, "you must understand the gravity of your situation. Gossip in noble courts is sharper than any blade, and twice as quick to draw blood. But I've done nothing wrong, Anna whispered, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Truth matters less than perception to some, Father Matthias replied, and those who fear losing power will twist any truth to serve their purposes. He patted her hand gently. Be cautious, dear one. Watch, pray, and guard your heart. As evening approached, a page summoned Anna to the library. Her feet felt heavy as she climbed the familiar stairs, wondering if the prince had heard the vicious rumors. Would he believe Count Reinhardt's lies? The library was warm with firelight, but Prince Leopold stood rigid by the window, his broad, shoulders tense beneath his formal coat. He turned as Anna entered, and she caught the troubled frown that creased his brow before he smoothed his features into careful neutrality. Good evening, he said, gesturing to the reading chair. I trust you are well? Yes, Your Highness, Anna replied softly, taking her seat. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the book of poetry he had selected. As she began to read, her voice carried the familiar verses into the quiet room, but she felt the prince's distraction in his delayed reactions, the way his responses seemed distant. During a pause between poems, she dared to glance up and found him staring into the fire, that same worried frown having returned to his face. Her heart sank. Surely he had heard the rumors. Surely now he would see her as everyone else did, a burden, a source of scandal, a mistake to be corrected. She returned to the poetry, but the words blurred before her eyes as fear and uncertainty clouded her mind. Days passed like gentle waves after the fête, each one bringing a small measure of peace to Anna's heart. On this crisp morning, she made her way to the stables, carrying a basket of fresh carrots and apples for the horses. The sweet scent of hay and leather welcomed her as she stepped inside, where Jakob was already at work, his slight limp not slowing his cheerful movements. "Good morrow, Anna," he called out, his face brightening. "Come to help with the morning feeds." Indeed. She smiled, setting down her basket. These beauties deserve their treats. Together they moved from stall to stall, Jakob speaking softly to each horse as Anna offered the fruits and vegetables. His gentle way with the animals touched her heart. Here was someone else who knew what it meant to be judged by appearance. Alone. "You know," Jakob said as they reached the last stall, "I've watched how those fancy lords and ladies treat you." He paused, patting the nose of a dappled mare. "But you're worth more than the lot of them. You've got kindness in your heart. Real kindness. Not like their false smiles and sharp tongues." Anna felt tears prick at her eyes at his simple words. "Thank you, Jakob. Your friendship means more than—" But before she could finish, heavy footsteps echoed at the stable entrance. A palace guard stood there, his face stern. "You're to come with me," he announced. "The prince's council demands your presence. Now." Anna's heart lurched. She cast one frightened glance at Jakob, who looked equally alarmed before following the guard. Her legs trembled as she was led through the castle's corridors and into the great hall where the prince's council sat in judgment. The room buzzed with whispers as she entered. Nobles lined the walls in their fine silks and velvets, their faces twisted with barely concealed disdain. At the head of the long table sat Prince Leopold, his expression unreadable, while Count Reinhardt stood beside him, clutching a stack of papers. "Your Highness," Reinhardt's voice dripped with false concern, "I present evidence that this person is not who she appears to be." He flourished the documents dramatically. "These records prove she is nothing but a runaway serf, the daughter of bound peasants who fled their rightful masters' lands." The papers rustled as they were passed among the council members. Anna's mouth went dry. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but no words would come. "Furthermore," Reinhardt continued, his eyes glittering with malice, "her presence here is an affront to your noble house, a serf, dining in the great hall, reading in your private library, dancing at your fete. It cannot be borne." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered nobles. Anna finally found her voice, small though it was. "Please, your highness, Silence!" Reinhardt thundered. "Serfs do not speak in the presence of their betters." Anna's eyes sought Prince Leopold's, desperately searching for any sign of the gentleness she had come to know. But he sat still as stone, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond her. "Remove this fraud from our sight," Reinhardt commanded, and guards stepped forward to seize Anna's arms. She did not resist as they dragged her through the castle, up winding stairs to her own chamber. The door slammed behind her with the heavy thud of a bolt being drawn. Her room, once a sanctuary, had become a prison. As darkness fell, a servant silently slipped a single candle beneath her door, a small mercy in her despair. By its flickering light, Anna sank to her knees beside the bed. From beneath her bodice, she drew forth the simple wooden rosary that had been her mother's last gift. The smooth beads, worn from years of prayers, brought comfort to her trembling fingers. Tears fell freely as she whispered the familiar prayers of her childhood. Each bead carried memories, her mother's warm hands guiding hers, teaching her the words. Quiet evenings by the hearth, the peace of knowing she was loved. Now, alone in her makeshift cell, those memories were all she had left. The candle burned low as Anna continued her prayers, her whispered words mixing with quiet sobs in the growing darkness. Outside her window, the moon rose over the prince's estate, casting long shadows across the grounds where just days before she had walked in hope and growing trust. The pale morning sun cast long shadows through the castle's great hall windows as guards dragged Anna forward in heavy iron chains. Her simple dress was wrinkled from her night in the locked chamber, but she held her head high despite her trembling hands. The vast chamber buzzed with whispers and cruel laughter as nobles gathered to witness her humiliation. "Look how the fat so stumbles!" a richly dressed lady called out, hiding her smirk behind a painted fan. Others joined in, their mockery growing bolder with each passing moment. "False maid! Deceiver!" The words cut through the air like daggers. Anna's chains rattled against the marble floor as the guards forced her to the center of the hall. The sound echoed off the high stone walls, mixing with the jeers of the assembled court. Her legs trembled beneath her, but she refused to let them see her fear. These were the same people who had watched her dance with their prince just days ago. Now they showed their true faces. Count Reinhardt stood near the throne, his thin lips curved in a satisfied smile. Beside him stood a priest Anna had never seen before. Not the kindly Father Matthias, but a stern-faced man with cold eyes and an ornate golden cross hanging from his neck. "Your Grace," Reinhardt called out, bowing low to Prince Leopold, who sat rigid upon his throne. "We have brought the deceiver before you as commanded, and we have summoned Father Bernard to speak to her." "Character." The priest stepped forward, his dark robes rustling against the floor. "This woman," he declared, his voice ringing through the hall, "has committed grave sins of deception. She has risen above her station through trickery and false claims of gentle birth." Anna's heart pounded in her chest, but she lifted her chin. "I have never claimed gentle birth," she said clearly, though her voice shook. "I have only honored the memory of my mother, who served honestly and well." Laughter erupted again. "The sow speaks!" someone called out. "Silence her!" "Your mother was nothing but a common serf," Father Bernard said coldly. "Confess your deception now, and perhaps God will show mercy on your soul." Anna felt tears burning in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I will not deny my mother or her memory. She served the late Duchess faithfully until her dying breath. That is the only truth I know." The hall erupted in angry shouts and accusations. Ladies whispered behind their fans while lords called for punishment. The chains bit into Anna's wrists as she stood trembling but upright, facing their scorn with quiet dignity. Suddenly, Prince Leopold rose from his throne. The motion was so swift and forceful that the entire hall fell silent at once. His face was like carved marble, but his eyes blazed with carefully controlled fury. "Silence!" he commanded, his voice cutting through the last whispers like a blade. "I will have silence in this hall." The nobles drew back, startled by the steel in their prince's voice. Even Count Reinhardt's smirk faltered. "You gather here," Leopold continued, his words measured but intense, "to mock and condemn based on lies and gossip. You speak of deception while practicing it yourselves." He descended the throne steps slowly, his boots echoing on the marble. "I have remained silent too long, watching this cruel sport. But now I will speak, for I hold in my possession the truth that none here can dispute." From within his coat, he withdrew a sealed letter, the wax bearing the unmistakable mark of the E, late Duchess. The sight of it sent fresh whispers rippling through the hall. "My mother, may God rest her soul, left this in my care before her death," Leopold announced. "It concerns the true parentage and circumstances of the woman you mock so freely today." Anna's legs gave way beneath her. She sank to her knees, the chains clanking against the floor. Her heart seemed to stop beating as she stared at the letter in the prince's hand. In that small packet of paper lay either her salvation or her final condemnation. The assembled court held its breath. Count Reinhardt's face had gone pale, while Father Bernard clutched his golden cross. Anna remained on her knees, head bowed, caught between hope and terror as she waited to learn what truth the Duchess had preserved about her past. The great hall fell silent as Prince Leopold broke the aged seal of his mother's letter. The red wax crumbled, brittle with the passage of years, scattering tiny fragments across the polished marble floor. His fingers trembled slightly as he unfolded the delicate parchment, yellowed at its edges. The assembled court held their collective breath, waiting. Anna remained on her knees, the iron chains heavy against her wrists. Her heart thundered in her chest as she watched the prince's eyes move across the page. The morning sunlight streaming through the high windows cast his face in sharp relief, and she saw something shift in his expression. A softening around his eyes, a slight parting of his lips. "My dearest Leopold," he began reading aloud, his voice clear and strong in the hushed chamber. "If you are reading these words, then the time has come for a truth long held in silence to be revealed." The prince paused, his gaze sweeping across the gathered nobles before continuing. "You were but a child when my dear friend and most trusted maid, Margaret, gave her life to save mine. On that terrible day, when our carriage lost control on the mountain path, it was Margaret who pushed me from harm's way, sacrificing herself in my stead." Gasps rippled through the assembly. Anna felt tears welling in her eyes at the mention of her mother's name. Margaret. She had been so young. When her mother died, the memories were like faded paintings in her mind. What few knew, Leopold continued reading, was that Margaret left behind a daughter, a sweet child with her mother's kind eyes and gentle spirit. In my grief and gratitude, I arranged for this child to be raised in safety, away from the intrigues of court life. That child's name is Anna. The chains around Anna's wrists suddenly felt heavier as all eyes turned to her. She could hear the rustle of silk gowns and the whispered conversations breaking out across the hall. Though not of noble birth, Anna's legacy is one of the highest nobility of spirit, that of sacrifice and unwavering loyalty. It was my wish that when the time was right, you would restore her to a place of honor, as I could not do in life. Count. Reinhardt's face had drained of all color, his carefully constructed web of lies unraveling with each word. He took an unsteady step backward, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "The documents I have preserved with this letter," Leopold continued, now holding up several additional papers, "prove beyond doubt that Anna is free-born, the daughter of my mother's most trusted companion. These papers bear the Duchess's seal and signature, as well as witness statements from the day of the accident." The prince's voice grew harder as he turned to address Count Reinhardt directly. "Your forged documents claiming her as a runaway serf are hereby revealed as the malicious fabrications they are." Reinhardt's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The courtiers who had stood with him moments before now stepped away, leaving him isolated in his shame. Prince Leopold descended from his throne, the letter still in his hand. The crowd parted before him as he approached Anna, still kneeling in her chains. The morning light caught the gold threads in his formal jacket as he extended his hand to her. "Rise," he commanded softly, but loud enough for all to hear. "Rise, Anna, daughter of Margaret, whose sacrifice we honor this day." With gentle strength, he helped her to her feet. A guard hurried forward with keys, and the chains fell away from her wrists with a loud clank against the marble floor. Anna stood straight and tall despite her trembling legs, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. The great hall erupted in a chaos of voices. Some nobles immediately began offering loud apologies for their previous cruelty, while others whispered furiously among themselves. A few of the older courtiers were weeping openly, having known and remembered the late Duchess and her brave maid. Through it all, Prince Leopold kept hold of Anna's hand, presenting her before the court with quiet dignity. His grip was warm and steady, anchoring her amid the storm of emotions swirling through the vast chamber. And in that moment, as the morning sun streamed through the windows and the truth of her mother's sacrifice echoed in her heart, Anna stood, transformed, no longer a slave, but a woman with a legacy of love and courage that no noble title could outshine. The library's familiar warmth enveloped Anna as she entered that evening. Beeswax candles flickered in their brass holders, casting a gentle glow over the leather-bound books she had come to love. Prince Leopold stood by the window, his figure silhouetted against the deepening twilight. He turned as she approached, and she saw an unfamiliar vulnerability in his eyes. "Please, sit with me," he said softly, gesturing to the cushioned window seat where she had spent so many hours reading to him, the same seat where their story had truly begun. Anna settled herself carefully, smoothing her simple gown, no longer a slave's garment, but not yet a noblewoman's finery. Leopold remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back as if gathering. "Courage, I must confess something," he began, his voice low and earnest. "That day in the marketplace when I spoke those cruel words," he paused, shame evident in his expression, "I saw in you something that reminded me of my mother's stories of your own mother. But I also saw how the nobles targeted you for sport. I thought..." He drew a deep breath. "I thought by choosing you, I could shield you from worse fates. What I never expected was how you would claim my heart with your quiet strength and genuine spirit." Anna's eyes welled with tears as understanding dawned. What had seemed like cruelty had been protection, however imperfectly offered. Leopold knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "You have taught me that true nobility lies in the heart," he said. "I know I am not worthy of your forgiveness for that first cruelty, but I pray you might consider a greater kindness." His voice trembled slightly. "Anna, daughter of Margaret, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Joy and disbelief warred in Anna's heart. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Yes, my prince." The news spread quickly through the castle and village. Father Matthias, with quiet satisfaction, arranged for the banns to be read in the village church. Though some nobles bristled at the match, their protests fell on deaf ears. The common people, who had witnessed Anna's dignity through all her trials, celebrated the news with genuine warmth. That evening, at the formal betrothal supper, Anna sat beside Leopold at the high table, still amazed by the turn her life had taken. But what brought the warmest smile to her face was seeing Marta and Jakob seated among the honored guests, their joy for her evident in their beaming faces. Jakob had polished his best boots for the occasion, while Marta wore a new cap. She had sewn specially. Looking around the table at these dear faces, Leopold's gentle smile, Father Matthias's quiet approval, Marta's motherly pride, and Jakob's irrepressible grin, Anna felt her heart might burst. She had gained not just a future husband, but a true family, bound together by love rather than blood or title. The summer morning dawned bright and clear as church bells rang across the village. Their joyful pealing drew both nobles and peasants to gather along the path to the ancient stone. Church. Anna walked slowly forward, her heart full of wonder at how God's grace had led her to this moment. Her gown was simple yet elegant. Ivory silk with modest lace trim, chosen to honor both her new station and her humble roots. As she passed, village women tossed wildflowers before her feet. Children waved enthusiastically, and even the oldest grandmother wiped away happy tears. These were her people, who had witnessed her trials and celebrated her triumph. Inside the church, Leopold waited at the altar, his eyes shining with pride as Father Matthias joined their hands in holy matrimony. The prince's voice rang clear and strong through his vows, while Anna's softer tones carried the weight of deep emotion. In the months that followed, the estate flourished under their shared vision. Anna, remembering her own experiences of hunger and degradation, established kitchens where the poor could find hot meals and dignity. Children of servants who once had no hope of education now gathered daily in a converted storehouse to learn their letters and numbers. Widows found work and shelter in new weaving rooms Anna created, their skilled hands producing fine linens, while their children played safely nearby. When courtiers whispered that such charity was beneath their prince's station, Leopold silenced them with one stern glance. "My wife's compassion," he would declare firmly, "brings more honor to our house than all your empty ceremonies." As summer deepened toward autumn, the newlyweds often walked together through the castle orchards at twilight. The same trees that had witnessed their first tentative conversations now sheltered their deepening love. One evening, as golden light filtered through the leaves, Leopold squeezed Anna's hand and said, "Do you remember my cruel words that day at the market?" Anna's smile was radiant as she turned to face him. "I'll take the fat one," she quoted softly, then added, "A cruel jest became God's providence." Their fingers intertwined as they gazed at each other, understanding that their love had grown into something far greater than themselves. It had become a beacon of hope, showing all who witnessed it that true worth lay not in titles or appearance, but in the capacity of the heart to love and serve others. If something today spoke to the part of you that still believes in love, stay a while. Subscribe. I'll be here again tomorrow with another story worth feeling.